Hi, and welcome to a live Q&A with Esther Brunat, one of the stars of TI's Smart Space videos. My name is Curtis Brown, and I'll be the host of this session this evening. First things first, to the audience, you guys that are out there watching, we really would love to have you joining in the conversation. And so, first of all, just let us know where you're watching from, what grades you teach, and why you're interested in watching this Q&A. The second thing, as we ask questions, as I interview Esther, please put your comments, your commentary into the chat box, and we'd love to address that and just make this discussion as interactive as possible. And so, yeah, just answer the questions just as though I was asking them of you. And then we're really excited to have Esther here with us this evening. Esther is a South Florida high school math teacher. She teaches Algebra 2 primarily. And she is also a social media influencer. You can follow her at Esther Brunat, on Instagram and TikTok, and I don't know, Esther, a whole bunch of other places. Just look her up and it'd be awesome. So Esther, are you super excited to have this conversation? I know I am.
I'm pumped. Every time we get together, it's a good time.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah, it is a good time. We laugh a lot. So okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask you our first question. So can you talk a little bit about the connections that we were trying to make and some of the things we were trying to do as we built this Smart Space video series with you, connecting transformations of functions to graphing of conic sections and kind of that whole thing? Can you talk about what we were trying to do there?
Yeah, so I just like conic sections in general, and because the school year got cut short last year, didn't get to do them. So when you guys approached me about helping out with the Smart Space videos, I was like, first of all, yes, because I would like to do this topic. And we spend a good chunk of time on transformations in high school, and I teach Algebra 2 right now. So, you kind of start them in Algebra 1 with parabolas and, so we start them there with linear functions like transformations. And then when they get to geometry, then you kind of do like planar, transformations with shapes and figures. So then they get to Algebra 2, and we do like a lot of parent functions and then the transformations that go along with them. So I feel like it's fun to watch that specific skill follow them all the way to when we get to conic sections, because we still have that same H and K value that follows them. So they kind of have this background knowledge already in their head. And so applying that to another subject after having built upon that subject for a few years, feel like it's nice and smooth, I feel like, and it's not as painful as the first time you introduce the kids to transformation. It's a little easier, it's a little smoother, like they're just taking this new thing and taking this other thing and putting them together. So that was really fun to watch that transformation, pun intended, happen with the students and with the curriculum.
Yeah, for sure. And I think tackling, you hit it right on the head. We were tackling some topics that maybe people didn't have a chance to get to last year, and trying to give some sort of just-in-time type ideas where people could actually take these videos and share them with their students, and get that information to them in a different venue than maybe what their normal classroom might have looked like. And as a matter of fact, it seems like we're still all in this boat together of doing remote learning and all of that kind of stuff. And that's one of your big skill sets, right? Like you really to talk about doing these things. And so I'm going to skip around a little bit, but I'm going to ask you a little bit about making virtual lessons. Like, do you have a couple of tips, maybe your number one tip for putting together virtual lessons and things that maybe can be interactive for your students? Or what's your kind of number one tips for that?
My number one tip is learning to use PowerPoint and Keynote. So that is something that for the last couple of years in education, people have said, don't use PowerPoint to lecture, don't whatever, and I think it's because people don't actually know how to use PowerPoint properly, right? So in the last couple of years, I've learned like a lot, and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface, to be honest, of all the things that
Right.
PowerPoint can do visually
Hmm.
to teach math. So when I started, I think it last year when I was doing my transformations lesson, there was like a move tool. I'm a Mac user, so I use Keynote, but it's the same thing as PowerPoint. And PowerPoint has an animation that also helps you do the same thing, that you can move something, so from one position to another. So I can move a whole figure, I can move a whole line. So when I figured that out, I was like, oh my goodness, because sometimes when you're communicating to your students, like, you're going to move this point down 3 spaces and left 2 spaces, right? They're not really hearing you. You know, you
Right. They're not seeing it anyway.
yes.
Right. They might be hearing you, but the whole connection between what they're hearing and what they're seeing, they just imagine that, right? It's really tough.
So what the PowerPoint presentations and the keynote presentations allowed me to do was to let them visualize each point from the parent graph moving to the transformation. And that was a game changer for me last year. Once I realized that I could make that happen, it was like, oh, bet, like what else can we do with this to make my students be able to visualize their concepts even better. So I started teaching not math for college readiness, advanced topics this year. So advanced topics is like a step above algebra 2. And so we're trying
Right.
to get them ready for algebra, college algebra. And so we're doing interval notation at the beginning. And so I just made like a lesson for interval notation to like introduce them to it again, because I know they forgot. It's okay.
Right.
And
That's the truth.
I've always struggled with how to properly describe like unions and intersections. I'm like, you just like the overlap, and then the like, and the verbally, it's coming out of my mouth properly, but they're still, for some reason, we're never really doing well with that, or like how to write the interval notation versus the set notation. So I put a visual boundary on the number lines this year, you know, and I made it slide in so that they could see like exactly, this is visually what a union look like. This union looks like. This is visually what an intersection looks like. And I'm really excited. So for me, that's my biggest distance learning thing. And it's not just distance learning, honestly, it's when I'm in the classroom also, is like, how can I connect how can I connect them visually to the content so that they're not just hearing me, but like seeing all of this stuff that I'm saying, you know?
Right. So like the whole concept of like the power of visualization and motion in your slides and things. And I've also noticed, and Rory, by the way, says that says you're a presentation master.
I
Just
love
want to put that
Rory.
out there.
That's my girl.
So
I teach algebra.
so like the whole concept of just interactivity, something that, so it's not just a stale static slide, but rather as you're producing this video, one, just having motion happen on the screen that demonstrates whatever the concept is, be it the interval notation or transformations or whatever the idea is, plotting points, whatever. There's also just that the concept of maybe having your face on the screen, at least somehow. And I've seen you do that, where you've like figured out how to put your face on the screen with a virtual background, and like you're on the slide, but you're not really on the slide. And like that, the whole green screen thing, that's really, I think, a second thing that you do a lot that I think is really pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. I forgot about that. That's true. The green screen, I take that for granted because it's just what I do now. But I get asked about that all the time. How do I get my face on the screen? And I just knew when we went digital in March, I just knew part of what connects my students to my class is me. And I had a hard time thinking about them watching the videos without actually seeing me on the screen. And I was like, I have to figure out a way. And that's what birthed that, kind of, like I was like, I have to be on the screen. How do I get on the screen? And then when I realized the green screen can make all my dreams come true.
Right, right. I mean, it's one thing to have kind of the talking head in the corner, but it's totally different whenever you can actually almost be a part of the screen, right?
Yes,
With your face, and you can point to things and you can do things.
absolutely.
That's just awesome. So that does take a little bit of skill, but you've learned it. And I think, you know, you've even started talking about like how to like helping people do that, right?
Yeah, I have some YouTube tutorials on my YouTube channel to walk people through it. I'll be doing a few more also coming soon. So
Awesome.
love to watch teachers do that too. So I've done a couple a conference presentation about that also.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I've got another question that came in from the audience. Allison asks this. She says, any advice for dealing with students who are struggling with more with math in a virtual environment? You know, this is kind of a tough way to learn math. I know I've been watching my son, who's in 3rd grade, trying to help him with his learning of mathematics in this virtual environment. And I'm telling you, like, fortunately, my wife is a 2nd grade teacher, and I went and I grabbed a whole bunch of the hundreds blocks and 10, you know, the 10 blocks and the unit cubes, and we like kind of made this whole thing, right? So I thought, man, what would I do if I didn't have this like closet back here full of stuff that I can pull from, right, to help my son?
Right.
So do you have any advice just for helping students who are struggling more in this virtual environment?
So just like everybody else, I'm new to this too. However, I'm trying my best. For me, what I know is like in the classroom, what is helpful is that I get to see what they're doing, right?
Right.
I can read their body language, and I can, you know, I can tell from a mile away, this kid back there, they're struggling, you know? So
right.
I've been brainstorming about like, how can I actually figure that out virtually without their cameras being on, with them refusing to unmute themselves sometimes, you know, like how do I figure that out? So I haven't tried it out yet, but I'm excited to try it out tomorrow. I recently started trying out something called Pear Deck, which is a Google Slides add-on. And so you would like present a slide, and then the kids go to a website, type in a code. And so when they go to the website and then they type in the code, I can put on a slide, draw an answer, right?
Oh,
They
okay.
can draw
Sure.
something. So I'm going to use it as a virtual whiteboard tomorrow and tell them to draw me like the steps of doing the problem. Right now we're factoring, and factoring is the backbone of algebra 2. Like if they don't get it now, like every other chapter, I tell them, I was like, it's coming back to haunt you every chapter. You know?
Yeah. You got to be able to factor. You got to know that whole,
So they need that
property thing. Yeah.
So tomorrow I'm really gonna see what's what, you know, because photo math is happening, and photo math can't happen if I tell you to show your work. So that's what I'm really excited about, to see who's really struggling and who's actually really got it. And I can sometimes tell that because I also like sporadically kind of call on my kids, and I try to set their minds at ease, and I say, hey, if I call on you, and you don't know what the answer is, it's okay if you don't know what the answer is. I will walk you through it. The purpose of me calling on you is not to embarrass you. The purpose of me calling on you is not just so you can tell me the answer. I know the answer. The answer is already in the chat box because all of your classmates put it there already. The purpose is like, let's talk through it. How did we arrive at that answer? You know, so I'm trying my best to do that. I would be lying to you if I said it was foolproof, because it's not. I get a lot of, my mic doesn't work. And I'm like, how? Like in all my years of having a laptop, my mic, that's another soapbox. I'm going to get off that soapbox. But I'm like, then go on your phone. Your phone mic works anyway.
Yeah. Well, and the conversation really is about their conceptual understanding, right? And their ability to talk you through what it is they are thinking, because it's for you to be able to find out what it is they're thinking in order to do what you would do in the classroom, which is read their body language and kind of listen to what they're saying. Now you're trying to get what they're saying and listen to how they're understanding something and letting them talk to you about how they see it, in order for you to be able to make an adjustment or a conversation. So here's another couple of questions that have come in while we're chatting here. I had one when we were talking about green screens that came in. How long does it take to make a green screen video? Stephanie asks that.
That's actually, it actually doesn't take as long. The first time you learn something always takes super long. Like, but after I got the hang of it, basically I just set up my phone, set up my green screen, record at the same time as I do my thing. But I have, my editing software is Final Cut Pro, and it was worth the investment because it allows me to do it quickly and seamlessly. So I just put the two videos on top of each other, click the green screen effect, and then that's it. It's done.
There you go. There you go. That's awesome. I got another question here. Rory wants to know if you're making all of your videos on video lessons on YouTube. And then I have a question related to that.
Okay. Yes. I started making them last spring, and then during the summer, I started, I prepped for the school year. So I have a few more lessons that are not done yet, but for my new prep for advanced topics, I am doing that also, making their videos. And that just, one, it saves me because if a student is struggling, they have a resource. And then two, if to do asynchronous learning, whatever the new fancy word is, like, you know, I can
Well,
send
sure, yeah.
to do there. And then if a student is absent also, there's right there the lesson. And I always struggled with that as a teacher. If my kids were absent, how did I catch them up? Like, where do I find the time? So that has been just the most, I didn't realize how much video was going to be an integral part of my classroom, and I'm glad I got into it. So yeah, all my lessons are available, and I hope other teachers use them.
For sure, for sure. That's awesome. That's so good of you to share. And Parisa just asked this really great question. She wants to know how you became so brave. How did you become so brave to try all these new tools? And a lot of times teachers are scared. I know myself, I was kind of, I wanted to do new stuff, but I wasn't always like ready to like just jump off, right? And
right.
So, you know, we kind of wait till somebody else does a little bit. So what makes you so brave to jump out and incorporate all these new tools and not worried about making mistakes? Or
first of all, I love the word brave. Me and my Squadratics buddies, we just hosted a conference for math teachers, and we were at one of our sessions, we were kind of just like talking about this new school year. And one of our participants from Chile, she said, you know, teachers have really had to be brave this school year, like, you know, and in the spring, like we're all like fish out of water right now, trying to figure out what this new, like, you know, arena of learning is like. So bravery's coming with the territory at this point. But it really bothers me if I can't get feedback from my students, right? So so for me, being brave is like, it was my fear of not being able to know what's going on in a student's head, and if they're actually learning and digesting the information is greater than my fear of like, this is something new, I don't want to try it, you know? So that fear conquers that one. So that's why I try new things. I think I mull it over in my brain a little bit and think about like my teaching style and how I like to present information and and if I feel like it would go well with me, then I'll probably test it out on my own first, which is what I did with Pear Deck. I tested it out. I'd heard about it. I tested it out on my own, started a little session with me, but then I also willingly admit that to my students. Guys, it's the first time I'm doing this, you know, we're figuring it out together.
That's so important to be just open like that. I love that, to be able to say to your students, because it shows them it's okay to try.
Yes, exactly. So I think that that's so important. And then that sets me at ease. If I'm like,
Right,
if I
right.
tell them, hey, I might make a mistake here, I might mess up here, it's like, I can breathe a little bit because we're all on the same page. I don't have to put on a front like I have it all together.
Right, right. Sometimes we as teachers have that pressure. We feel like, man, we got to have it perfect in front of these kids. And the fact of the matter is we don't, right? We can be human, and I think it's beneficial to our students for them to hear us be human. I
Yeah.
told that to my AP Stat students the first time I was going to teach that course. I said, listen, you guys are going to learn this in spite of me, not because of me. We're going to do this together. And here we go. So that's really, really good. Thank you for sharing. And Parisa says, well, wow, Esther, thank you for sharing your vulnerabilities and fears. I know that resonates with your students.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, I mean, because that's totally it. That's totally it. So I want to take that just a step further. Is there anything that while we were doing this series that maybe you learned or thought about that's helping you with this year's planning or things you might want to do next year if you missed the chance already?
yeah. First of all, I would just like to say that Curtis is low-key a genius. So just in dialoguing with him about the content that we were doing, I learned a lot. So I did not put together like dilations and stuff like with transformations of functions until I started talking to Curtis. I was like, that's true. Those are the same thing, aren't they? So first of all, that makes me a better teacher of just, I made connections, right? So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was when we were doing parabolas, there was an example in my textbook because I was like researching some of this stuff because it had been a while since I'd done conics, and there was an example about parabolic parabolic microphones. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I went to go do some research, like, and found out like who created the microphone. And so because I found that out, I found out it was a Black inventor. And so I started to think about how could I be more intentional in my classroom about
Mm,
highlighting, people of color in the STEM field. And so
yes.
now this school year, that's one of me and Dr. Jones's, my friend Camille, our projects, like how can we incorporate more of those, and how can we help other teachers incorporate those things into their lessons too? How can we do the research, help them out, and so that we can all make STEM more accessible for everybody.
I love that. Making it relatable. That's so good. That's really awesome. Yeah, continue to share that work because that's really important work that you guys are doing. Making those connections and seeing all that. That's awesome. That's really, really good. I'm glad to know you guys are tackling that project. Um,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's really good. So here's another. Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left here. I want to kind of tackle a couple of other things. First of all, we did have an awful lot of fun in our sessions, right? I mean, we laugh a lot, and that's totally awesome.
Yep.
So I just I want to know, like, do you find that humor helps with your students at all in what you're doing and trying to help them learn? Like, do they relate better because of that? Do they learn better? Like, are there things you can say to that?
I would definitely think so. So I people talk a lot about math anxiety, and like my friend Dr. Jones, she talks about math esteem a lot, and have
Sure.
I feel like half the battle with students is like getting them out of that feeling that they get when they think of math. You know,
Right.
I made a video the other day, this is a side note, but I promise to have a point. I made a video on TikTok the other day, asking students to like share like their dislike for math, like when did it start, whatever. I didn't get a lot of replies. However, I did get one like a college kid, probably freshman, sophomore in college, DM me on Instagram talking about,
Okay.
oh my gosh, she felt like I was attacking her, right? She was like, it is really hard for some, and I had teachers who did this, that, and the other thing. And I just remember thinking, so I messaged her back, we talked through it, and we got to a good place. But what really, she just had a bad experience, several bad experiences that led to her dislike of math, right? And then she
Right.
felt like teachers were always, you know, blaming her, and teachers were always like bullying her basically. And I was like, yo, this is crazy, because here you are, just because you had a bad experience, you came at me in my DMs, you know, because of all the bad experiences that you had. That kid had followed you, and it was that deep. And what I told her was,
Yeah.
I said, that is my number one thing that I make sure doesn't happen to my students. I tell my students at the beginning of the school year, at the end of this year, you may still not like math, but I promise you will like my class. So the number one thing that I want my students to walk away, that I want them to walk in the room and feel like it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
gonna be fine, because some of them really carry a lot of this anxiety with them, and it is unfortunate, and that's a lot of the struggle that happens in math. I feel like very little of it has to actually do with, oh, I can't do this. No, it's just, I had a bad experience, and every time I come into this, I'm carrying that emotion with me, and I can't get out of
Hmm.
it.
That's so important to create a safe space, right? It's so important to create a space where, failure isn't really something that we talk about as a poor thing or a bad thing, but rather a really exciting thing.
Yeah,
Mistakes are how we learn, right? I mean, when we mess up, and I was telling my son this the other day. I said, man, I said, if you never make a mistake while you're working on these problems, you're not actually learning anything.
yeah,
You already know it. Like it's you haven't learned anything because you've already know it. So if you're making mistakes, that means you're actually having an opportunity to learn. And I think that's so important to phrase things and frame things from the opportunity sort of aspect, rather than looking at it as I can't do it, or I didn't do it right, or the answer wasn't right. So and I tell my son all the time, it's not about right answers. Mathematics is not about right answers. I
right.
really don't care what happens at the bottom of the page. I care very much about what's going on in the middle of the page and what's going on inside of your head, right? Like I want to know what's happening in here so that I can understand how you're understanding it, so that then we can have a conversation about
Exactly.
mathematics, right?
Exactly. Oh my goodness, I could not have said that better.
Secondly, I get off on this little thing here. Um, and Priest says this, by the way, that just the fact that your students know that you care, that they will have a good experience, that has to mean a lot to your students. And I can see that in the way you're talking to me about this. I think that's totally awesome. And I know it has to mean a lot to your kids.
Very important to me, one of my classroom like values. So I'm glad that that comes through, because that is the most important.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It is. It's so important. It's so important. But we have to be able to get to our students and get them to thinking and believing that math is a safe space,
And sifting
right?
through those mistakes. Yeah, because that's
For
really what
sure.
I told my students the other day. They were factoring and trying to figure out what type of problems they were using. And I said, guys, this is a real life skill. Maybe you're not going to actually factor, but you are going to diagnose a problem. You are going to have to figure
Right.
out, there's a problem in front of me. How do I give it treatment? How do I remedy this and figure out what to do so that I get a solution? And that's real life.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And on that, Esther, we've really pretty much used up our 30 minutes. And so this is going to be kind of our time to wrap up a little bit. So I just want to tell you again, thank you so much for doing these videos. And I thoroughly enjoy watching you on Instagram and the other spaces. You do such a great job and do a lot of really great things. Thank you again for this session, this Q&A. I loved your answers to these questions. This was really great.
It's a great time. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, take care and we'll see you around, okay?
Bye, guys.
Bye.